I got into composting was when I went through infertility and had a huge struggle with that. It came back to I was missing a lot of nutrition in my food. Well, why are you missing so much nutrition in your food? Is because it's lacking in the soil. We're taking all the benefits from those food scraps and making a really rich compost. Our chickens and goats pick through everything. And that's kind of a random partnership, but the chickens will go and eat meat and cheese and certain vegetables first. They're like picky toddlers on one extreme, where our goats are kind of picky toddlers on the other extreme. We got a lot of like kale stems from a restaurant. If you can't feed people food, can you feed animals? And then if you can't feed animals, compost it. That way the landfill and burning food waste is your last resort. We keep the egg prices pretty low because you're feeding the chickens. We're just delivering them, washing them and stuff like that. So you get these really rich, nutritious eggs for not the like store prices. They make specialized packs that you can put on a goat. Goats can pack 25% of their body weight.
In this video, we are all the way out in Eastern Oregon at a place called North Powder, and we are featuring this amazing lady, the compost chick, who's managed to turn waste into nutrient-rich compost for our soils, conserve our environment, and at the same time create a business that is creating jobs in this area. Thank you so much for having us.
Thanks for coming out here to the small town of North Powder in Eastern Oregon.
Yeah, it's beautiful out here.
Yeah, you picked a great day in February that you can see the mountains and everything.
Nice. I'm gonna let her introduce herself, and she's gonna tell us the story and the idea behind the compost chick. Take it over.
All right, so I'm Liz Turner and I live out in North Powder, Oregon in Eastern Oregon. And I started the compost chick about 3 years ago. I've always loved gardening. I've always loved being outside with animals and stuff like that. So we already had chickens. We brought goats into our life for taking backpacking, and they had a lot of bedding that we had to do something with. So I just combined the food scraps from our kitchen with the goat bedding, and it made some really good rich compost. So I wanted to take that a step further. I was working in physical therapy, and I just had a few of my coworkers bring their food scraps to the office, and I would take them home, make compost. And with the chickens, they got cheaper eggs from me, but super high nutrient rich eggs. And I just had more and more coworkers that were like, I want to do this, I want to do this, I want cheaper eggs. Like, this is a great idea. So I kind of bounced around. Of course, you kind of play defense when you start a business because you don't want to take somebody else's name. So I had to make sure that like nobody else had the compost chick as a name. I do have a marketing degree from EOU. So I just wanted to make sure that I kind of use that in a way, and nobody was using the compost chick, and we also have chickens involved, so it was kind of a perfect kind of way to kind of tie that in. Plus, you know, I'm a girl, there's a ton of girls or women in composting. There are starting to be more and more, which is awesome. So that was kind of how we got like the name, and I have a professional illustrator friend who happened to do the logo. So there's a chicken on my shoulder and bright pink buckets. Like, who doesn't want a bright pink bucket? You know, everybody else had green or black or something like that, and I wanted to do something different. So I'm kind of known for having the bright pink buckets and a very Barbie themed chicken coop at our compost yard. I started with an Instagram, just kind of starting with tips and tricks, and then just kind of went from there. So, you know, when I was still working physical therapy, and I did this kind of like, I would do bucket pickups like after work. I would turn compost on Saturdays. So it just got to be where like I couldn't work a full-time job and do this full-time. So I cut back to like 2 days a week, and so I was doing routes 3 days a week and like turning compost during the week and stuff like that, washing buckets, doing, you know, you wear all the hats in the beginning of a business. So then I hired just someone to come wash buckets once a week, and that really helped because that seems to be where we get kind of bottlenecked. And then I ended up hiring like a part-time summer staff and slowly kept cutting back my hours in physical therapy. But you know, when you start a business in your backyard, you quickly run out of room. You'll see how big these piles are.
Yeah, exactly.
And So the next thing that we did 2 years in was try and look for land. So luckily we found this 5 acres in North Powder that was the old log yard of a mill from like the 70s, 80s, and 90s. So it's just got bark chips everywhere. So it's like perfect for composting. And so we got a hold of the owner, and so we officially got everything started down here in June. So that was the big expansion of the compost business. But now that we've got fencing and stuff, we've really just kind of been able to just keep it going.
Good, incredible.
Yeah.
Would you mind showing us around and telling us more about the farm, especially how it operates?
Yeah, there's lots of different reasons for why composting is important in general. So landfills and cemeteries are never going to have extra room. They're constantly running out of room. So as much as I say love over landfill, a lot of the times we're not trying to say landfills are never going to exist or anything. We're really just ensuring that they can live on the space that they are for longer. And food scraps is one of the biggest things that is sent to the landfill. And what we're doing is we're taking all the benefits from those food scraps and making a really rich compost, a living compost with lots of microbes to help set up your home garden or small farms. Because if your soil is lacking microbes, you're gonna continually have to put like synthetic fertilizers to try and get things grow. Your plants aren't gonna be as healthy, and your food isn't gonna be as nutritious. So one of the reasons that I got into composting was when I went through infertility and had a huge struggle with that. It came back to I was missing a lot of nutrition in my food. Well, why are you missing so much nutrition in your food? Is because it's lacking in the soil. And if your soil doesn't have microbes, the microbes' jobs are to break up all that nutrition to its smallest part so plants can actually bring it into their system and put it in like your tomato or anything like that. So if you're lacking microbes in your soil, your plants are going to continually struggle, and you're going to, end up just putting a lot of chemicals furthering the problem. So that is some of the reason that I got into composting, is because I've always loved gardening, but I've always grown up in Eastern Oregon where, let's just say, the soil sucks. If you were to look at some of the soil around here, it's lacking a lot of microbes, and it's really hard to grow things, especially in a drier climate. We keep our compost a little bit on the mulchier side, so it retains more moisture. That's one thing that compost is really good at, is also retaining the moisture so you don't have to water as much. But it's just another great way of taking what you would normally just throw out into the landfill and making something really good out of it. So we mix our food scraps with goat bedding and wood chips that we get from local tree services, and we have a small wood chipper that will chip Christmas trees. So we mix those two because you always want to balance between carbons and nitrogens so that the microbes, you're basically just setting up the perfect environment for microbes to grow. So in some ways I'm a microbe farmer instead of just a composter. So it's soil health, but also composting is one of the best ways to bring the carbon sequester down instead of having carbon released in the atmosphere. So I always say there's a tale of two banana peels. One goes to the landfill and creates methane because it's probably trying to break down in a plastic bag without oxygen, and it's just not a good environment to break down, so it creates methane. That's super bad for the environment. Whereas if you're the opposite banana peel, and maybe you come to a facility like ours, or you're composted in someone's backyard or another composting facility, you are constantly mixed with oxygen, which is what microbes need, and it breaks down and it brings that CO2 into that compost. Great for your plants, but also decreasing climate change. So I mean, there's so many reasons I love composting, but those are probably a few of the top ones that I think of, but mostly improving soil, decreasing climate change, and just making a better planet for the future. We come and pick up our customers' food scraps on a weekly basis if you're a resident. If you are a business, like our local college at Eastern Oregon University, we pick up several times a week, and they divert like 900 to 1,000 pounds a week, which is a huge benefit to the climate and to the community. So let's say You have this garlic that you put in your bucket. It comes here. We usually dump it out onto the active pile, and then we mix it with wood chips, leaves, goat bedding, whatnot. But before it gets covered with carbons, our chickens and goats pick through everything. And that's kind of a random partnership, but the chickens will go and eat meat and cheese and certain vegetables first. They're like picky toddlers on one extreme, where our goats are kind of picky toddlers on the other extreme. We got a lot of like kale stems from a restaurant, and they love those. They love like day old stale bread. So they kind of pick the opposite things. And if you look at the EPA's website for food waste hierarchy, you know, if you can't feed people food, can you feed animals? And then if you can't feed animals, compost it. That way the landfill and burning food waste is your last resort, just for the environmental aspect. So we kind of have that on a daily basis here. So if I get 100 pounds of food scraps between the chickens and the goats, they will probably eat 20 to 30 pounds before we cover it and everything like that. So we're decreasing the food waste to animals first, and then we compost everything that's left over. So that also is like a huge diet benefit to the chickens and the goats. Like I always say the chickens probably eat better than I do, because sometimes somebody put like a half a dragon fruit, and I don't know when the last time I would have bought a dragon fruit, or you know, I don't eat Brussels sprouts on a daily basis. Like the chickens get the best of any kind of food that's left over from our customers. It's just so much more nutrition than just feeding them grain or anything like that. They get a huge variety of nutrition from the food waste, and same with the goats. Like the goats are eating Christmas trees that we've gotten from the community. They eat some of the leaves. They love to eat bread and kale stems and things like that. So they're getting a higher nutrition than just alfalfa or hay, and the chickens are getting a much better variety of diet. Like you can tell by our yolks in our chicken eggs compared to a store-bought egg, that ours are just like nice big orange yolks that are super nutritious. It's really hard for me to eat eggs that are like a restaurant or like from the store, because I've been so spoiled by our compost raised eggs here. This clove of garlic you get put in your bucket, you come here, you get dumped out, the chickens and the goats don't eat you, so you get covered with wood chips and leaves, and then you get constantly turned for that first month to make sure that we get lots of oxygen into the compost pile to make those microbes happy. So we're constantly checking temperature of piles, because you want it to get over 131, so it kills all the bad bacteria. It also neutralizes seeds. So a lot of times you're like, oh, I don't want weed seeds in my compost, or I don't want a bunch of seeds. And my best example is EOU does this pumpkin smash event every fall, and we get the 1,200 pounds of smashed pumpkins back. So lots of pumpkin seeds. And usually each year we maybe get 2 to 3 pumpkin plants that sprout. So it's pretty good numbers. So we make sure everything gets really hot. We make sure everything is very incorporated, mixed really well, lots of oxygen. We also keep smaller and larger pieces of wood chips in there. So it's very porous, so the air can move through them, but also the chickens scratch through the active piles, and the goats will sometimes jump on them and play kind of king of the hill. So we get lots of oxygen through that, but then we also will turn it with our small bobcat. 9 months after this comes into the bucket, it will be fully finished. We'll sift it with our small sifter, and then it goes back to our customers between April and October. So customers are getting 6 5-gallon buckets of finished compost that they helped make. Along with, if you order eggs from us, when we swap out your bucket on your weekly route, we can deliver eggs along with that too. So we keep the egg prices pretty low, because you're feeding the chickens, we're just delivering them, washing them and stuff like that. So you get these really rich, nutritious eggs for not the like store prices.
I see you've got amazing guts here.
Oh yeah.
Tell us about the guts.
All right, so a few years ago, my husband and I got into backpacking goats, but they were young, and they created a lot of waste. But we had a friend from Arizona that said, goat poop is one of the best things you can put on your garden. I can't believe you guys aren't just selling goat poop. So one of the things that when I clean out their pen or anything like that, which has lots of goat manure and stuff like that, is we put that directly into the compost. So it's super high nutrients. They have multiple stomachs, so you're not getting like a bunch of weed seeds because it's all neutralized. Unlike if you get like a lot of horse manure, it will sprout up like crazy because they only have one stomach. So the goats not only eat a lot of the kale stems and some of the breads, lowering the waste right when we get it, but they also just love to be around. They love to strip all the bark off the Christmas trees that we get, but also their manure is really great.
Really great. So from a compost yard, you could get, let's say if you're having a compost field, you get to have goats in them, and goats would do, number one, if say they neutralize the seeds, reduce the volume of the compost, a lot of things you don't want into the compost. Then they'll give you their manure, which is really good. And in a lot of places, if you keep goats, then you get to have meat. Right?
We could, but they're kind of like our babies in a way. I mean, they all have names. And you can tell that they're extremely friendly.
That's one of the things I've realized about here in the country, in America, because I was raised in Africa.
Right.
And in Africa, this is a whole stack of meat.
I know.
Anyway, sorry for saying that they are pests.
I have eaten goat. One time, one of my coworkers brought... we thought it was shredded beef and it ended up being goat. So sometimes when they're not behaving very well, I say I'll turn them into tacos, but that's never happened.
Yeah, but the most amazing thing that is out of the picture is you've mentioned you take these goats backpacking with your husband. Tell us more about it in detail.
So this is Choco Moose, but she's only a year and a half. So we have to wait until he's 3 or 4. But they make specialized packs that you can put on a goat. And we have 5 really big goats that are over 200 pounds, and goats can pack 25% of their body weight. So that means each goat's packing like 50 to 75 pounds. Sometimes they can pack around 75. So that means like I could go backpacking without taking 60 pounds on my back in these beautiful mountains that we have. And I could take a cast iron pan if I wanted to. I could, I don't have to do that ultra light backpacking anymore. And then goats are also really good to take hunting. So if you go deer hunting or elk hunting, deer and elk don't find them as like a threat like your dog. They will just kind of ignore them because they think they're, one of them kind of thing. And then also, they could pack a quarter or, a big portion of meat out. So, and they're also they don't drink as much water as like horses or anything. They eat just about anything. So you don't have to pack food in with them. And they just kind of follow you like dogs. I mean, really, they're just dogs with horns. And
they kind of like, I've seen videos where goats would scale mountains, walk
they're like boulders,
cliffs, and they're pretty small, so they are maneuverable in case you're out there in the wilderness. You have quite a number of dogs here. Are those for protection?
So we have 2 yellow labs, an older one named Norm, who's 8, and then we have Carl, who is a year and a half, who we named him partially after Carl Hammer from Vermont Composting Company. So sometimes we call him Compost Carl. So they're my 2 big 110-pound yellow labs. They come to work with me every day, so they don't know how spoiled that they get to go with their owner to work. But there's a lot of benefits, especially if you're gardening, to have your dogs with you, because then if any kind of predator like a skunk or a squirrel or anything like that, that a dog is kind of a predator to, will smell that dog smell and maybe not want to hang around and eat all your garden. So that's part of it. But also sometimes I'm just down here by myself, and so if you drive up unannounced, I will know.
Great.
They might jump into your car.
Pretty interesting how everything everything is interacting
Yeah.
with each other in the field, I mean, in this yard, and how everything is just useful in its own merit.
Everyone kind of has like their own job, but then they also kind of work together really, really well. So a lot of times when we dump compost in the compost piles or food waste in the compost piles, like the goats and the chickens are all in there all at once. But they're all eating different things, so they don't really get mad at each other.
Okay.
So
walk us through how you've turned this entire project into a business. How do you do that?
So we are like a membership-based business. So as a customer, you sign up and you can choose how often you pay. It's kind of like the gym membership, but for composting. You can pay monthly, you can pay every 6 months, you can pay yearly. You get a little discount if you do 6 months or yearly. So our base price is $24 a month for your home. And then businesses we base off of like how many times we need to swap buckets. And so that's really customizable for your restaurant, a school, a university, anything like that. So we can go up to 3 times a week for businesses. So like LeGrand, we go to LeGrand for business and residential pickups on Monday, Wednesdays, and Fridays. We do the residential pickups on Mondays, and then businesses Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. And then Baker City, we go there on Thursdays. Wednesdays, today, we do a small town routes. We go to all these little tiny towns that are kind of all around. It's kind of like a really long country drive for my driver. And then we also do a couple businesses that day too. So you pay a membership fee. So we can take, your food scraps on a weekly basis. We'll take your leaves in the fall. We'll take your Christmas tree in January or in February. So there's a lot of extra benefits to being a member. And then you also get finished compost back. So any leftover compost after we've given it back to customers, we sell that to small farms, to individuals for their own gardens. So we have a membership fee that kind of pays for, our gas and, like the labor that we have to put into composting. And then we also make a little bit of money off of the finished compost at the end. We also do worm castings. That seems to be a really hot item right now.
What is worm casting? So
it's composting with red wiggler worms. So they break everything down, and it's lots of microbes in that also, but it's also a neutral pH. So here we have a lot of pine trees, which can make your soil really acidic. So people can scatter around worm castings, and it's a very small amount for a big impact. So a lot of times we just sell worm castings by a quart, and they do really, really well. We had one lady who bought like a bunch of sod for her lawn, and it kept dying in one corner. And she called the sod company. The sod company was like, "It's not the sod. I bet it's your soil in that corner. For whatever reason, your soil is not correct in that spot." So she got a hold of us and bought worm casting, sprinkled that in that corner, watered it, and it came back beautifully. So worm castings is a neutral pH, so whether your soil is really acidic or really basic, if you sprinkle worm castings on, it brings it closer to neutral where your plants want to be. So it's just a really good, awesome, like natural fertilizer that I love to use. So a lot of times what we say is, let's say you're setting up a raised garden bed at home. So you might put like cardboard and straw and leaves and stuff down, and then a really good layer of compost. Put all your plants in there, and then sprinkle just a tiny bit of worm castings on top, or replenish that garden bed throughout the year with some worm castings to just kind of give it that little natural boost that it needs. And I have a lot of customers that like once or twice a year, they'll buy worm castings from us, and they'll replenish all of their indoor plants with that. And they just happen to just get that little bit of a kick to kind of get going.
Nice.
So it's kind of it's one of my other favorite things that we sell. So our customers can even, like say you want an extra bucket of compost, we can deliver that to your door. We can deliver worm castings and eggs. So that's another great benefit, is we're making a little bit of money off of selling any extra that we have to either our current members, or we sell for a slightly higher price to people who are non-members.
Uh-huh.
So now that we have this compost yard, we'll be able to like maybe be open on a Saturday, and you can just pull up, buy compost, buy worm castings, buy a dozen eggs,
Yep.
pet the goats, and then be on your way. Instead of, because a lot of times when you buy compost in a bag at the store, it could be from last year, 2 years ago. He loves to play
boy.
fetch.
Yeah, he wants me to. Good
It
boy.
gets really
Fetch.
fast.
Good boy.
So a lot of times, if you're buying compost that's in a bag that's on a shelf, you have no idea how long it's been there.
Uh-huh.
And the fact that those microbes or lack of microbes are not eating through that bag tells me there's no real life left in there. So that's why like we sell Norm.
No, we are filming.
Anyone that comes here is just for him to play
okay,
fetch.
one last one, okay?
No, I have to put him. He gets really sassy like that.
Yeah.
So when we give compost to our customers, it's been sifted within 2 weeks. So worm castings are usually sifted within 3 days. And eggs are, if you go to the store and get eggs, it's going to be like a month old, right? If you get eggs from us, it's probably a week or less. So very, very fresh stuff that we can just get to you because there's no middleman.
Great.
Yeah,
Nice.
and then the other way that we make money is I go out and do a lot of education. So there's a lot of like outdoor school programs in the area. So I will get contracted and I will go teach for a day or a couple days to teach the next generation about how awesome composting is.
Great.
And then sometimes I'll go out and do other, like for Oregon State Farm Extension and things like that. Sometimes they'll have me talk about soil and the basics of composting and stuff like that too. So that's another avenue that we can make a little bit of money off of too.
Great. So, where do you see the compost chick in the next 5 years?
The next 5 years.
You've been 3 years into this.
Yeah. So in 5 years, when we're 8 years in, I'm hoping we have, just expanded at our current location to where we're just getting bigger and more efficient so that we can help, divert more food waste and also we can divert more food waste, but also have more finished product for the region. Because right now, you either have to go to Boise, which is a 2 to 3 hour drive, or you have to go closer to the depot. So we're hoping to kind of be that middle place that you can come and get high quality compost.
Awesome. Now, these people watching out there, maybe somebody is thinking of starting a compost heap business anywhere around the world, and I believe you could do this anywhere.
Yeah.
What is the most important tip that you could give them?
I mean, don't have yellow lab.
Okay.
Throw it in there.
Let's go. Yeah. Fetch.
So make sure you kind of have a steady input. So sometimes we run out of wood chips and that doesn't make then we're kind of backtracking on that. So making sure you have a steady supply of your carbons and your nitrogens. My dogs are going to kill me today. So making sure you have a steady supply of carbons and nitrogens because you want those pretty even or a little bit higher on the carbons. Just start kind of experimenting. Everyone has their own recipe, right? If I told 10 people to go home, make me a batch of chocolate chip cookies and bring them back, none of them would look the same, right?
Yeah.
They're all still chocolate chip cookies, everything can still be compost, but every own composter has maybe a slightly different recipe. But that could be because of your location. It could be because what you have, not everybody has goat manure in their compost like we do. Not everybody has chickens in their process, and not everybody takes meat and cheese. So there are a lot of basics. There's a lot of YouTubes and things like that you can watch to kind of get your basics down. And just kind of start experimenting because you might need to learn how do I check for water? How do I check for temperature? How do I know that this process is doing well? So kind of starting very small and making sure that you have a good product, testing that product, putting it in your own garden. If you don't want to use it, nobody else is going to use it either. It's hard to promote a product that you aren't interested. So there's a lot of times I fill up my garden garden beds with our compost. And when we get the garden area here up and going, like it's going to be all of our compost, because that's what we're promoting. It's saying like, look how much better this tomato tastes because it was grown with really high quality compost.
Yep.
So just, I guess, falling in love with the process of doing composting, learning and loving every aspect of it. Because I mean, I could go on and on about like the benefits of composting, or why I love composting, or why I think everyone should do it, or why everyone should be a customer.
Yeah.
But not everyone's gonna have that same opinion.
Yeah.
You know, it's kind of like getting, you know, whatever you go into business about, you've got to be like the smartest person about it, really. Like there's so much more I'm still learning, and you know, I'm not the smartest person if you put me in a room of composters, but I might be the smartest person about composting in a different setting, you know. You have to, you know, because people are going to question how you do your business, how, you know, you process composting, everything like that. And as long as you can back up why you do it, that comes across really well. If you're kind of like iffy about something when someone asks you, it's not going to be as beneficial. But I guess just, you know, any kind of business, you got to look, is there a need, and am I passionate about what I'm doing? And I think that's your biggest thing, is like, there's not another composter that does high quality compost in this area, and I love working outside, having my animals, and gardening. So that was kind of like a perfect fit of like, here's something that we're lacking in this area, and here's something that I can be insanely passionate about. So I'd say any business, you got to be really passionate about what you're doing.
Yeah.
Because there's going to be days that, like, you know, it's 10 degrees outside and there's a foot of snow and I don't really want to work, but I know that like my animals are going to need water and compost is going to need to be poured onto the pile and, you know, stuff like that. So if I didn't have that background and like knowing its benefits for everyone and being very passionate about it, it would be really hard to, you know, I can't call in sick when you own a business.
Yeah, definitely. Wow, that has been really insightful, and I've really enjoyed being with you in this farm and getting to learn about everything, work together, and how compost could be so beneficial for person and for society. Yeah, thank you so much for making time for us.
Thanks for coming.
Yeah,
all the way out to North Powder, Oregon.
Exactly. We've driven for 7 hours. Now, she's an amazing lady. This is an amazing business. Where would they find you?
So you can search our website, thecompostchick.com. So that will tell you about signing up for services, products that we make. You can submit, you know, an email about if you want more information, or if you want me to come teach at your school or business about composting. You can do that there. You can sign up for services. If you're a business, we'll come and kind of customize everything for you. But if you just want funny goat videos, I have a YouTube, The Compost Chick, and then I'm pretty active on Instagram at The Compost Chick and Facebook. And then we have a TikTok called Goats and Compost. So those are ways if you want to just see what we do on a daily basis, or just fun little tips about composting, you can see us there.
Good. Thank you guys for watching. Remember to give me a thumbs up, subscribe, and see you in the next one. Bye.